I believe in the power of images, and I believe images do change the world. Hi, I'm Mickalene Thomas. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. Sometimes I like to think of myself as a multi-hyphenate. I curate. I'm an educator. Yeah, I'm many things. What made me see and how I become an artist? Well, I think through another artist. I was studying pre-law. I wanted to be a lawyer. I was living in Portland, Oregon. It was around 1994. It tells my age a little. I was working at a law firm called Davis Wright Tremaine in Portland. I started out as a file clerk, became a paralegal assistant. And it was a job that I was aspiring to and wanted to be in that environment as I was in college there. And I went to see a show by Carrie Mae Weems at Portland Art Museum. And I went with a friend who's a photographer, Christopher Stark. We went together. He actually dragged me to the show. And it just blew my mind. Because for me, what really resonated was the familiarity of these works that personified and felt so real and familiar to my life. Like I can see it was Carrie Mae Weems' table series, and these photographs, the storytelling in them, I knew. I didn't even know I didn't need to know the backstory. Just visually, I knew what those images were. And I just remember feeling so like, wow, these are powerful. Like I felt like the young girl at the table. I knew what those dynamics were. I felt like it was my story. I was like, how does this person know about this? And how can you convey? And I just remember feeling so transformed in a way of wanting to understand the mystical nature of the power of what was happening then, that I just immediately went to the art store. I bought some paper and some oil pastels. I had already purchased some of the postcards from that show, and I used them as resources to make these drawings. They just started coming out, and I just was excited about it. But what I remember was how I felt. When you're standing in front of something that kind of impacts you here, then all you can think to do is to create an action. You don't know necessarily what the outcome is. You just know there was a moment that you can't really define, but it leads you somewhere. And what it led me to was not even a thought. It was like I just kind of moved through by going to the art store, doing these things, not really knowing that I would end up where I am today. But I knew I was transformed enough to go, that's what I want to do. If that's what art is, if it's about telling my story, if it's about using my personal life as an extension of creativity, that's what I want to do. And I just kind of use that always as the focus for how I do everything. So even my work today, like, it has to make sense to me to make it. It has to be really close to the heart. I think there's just history, specifically as a Black American queer woman, of putting together, patchworking your sort of narrative and story, right? It's a form of identity that is a long history within Black American history of like safekeeping things and putting them together, quilt making and sort of fabricative identities of layering and keeping them. So I think collage in one element, montage for me is that. And then the other way, there's a mode of construct to it, right? There's a political sort of inherence to sort of collage of sort of gathering and making sense of all the information and ideas that are around you and sort of placing them and recontextualizing them in a new way of seeing things. So I think for me, it's an extension of my practice, and a really kind of hierarchical, high priority, because it allows me to reframe my own ideas of how I see and understand the image. And it's a way of seeing, like drawing for me. You know, I like to think of the tools that I use as the scissors as this sort of apparatus of someone using a pencil and paper. You know, like for me, it's that way of like carving out with the form and shapes of new ideas and meanings of my images when you see them here. Like, so everything that I create, whether it's a painting or it ends up being a collage, it all has a collage element to them. And some of them have 2, 3, 4, 5 images related to that one collage or painting, because I'm constantly trying to reframe it as a new idea or make sense of it or have it not make sense. And it's okay. Like I like it when sometimes things don't quite go together, but that's also sort of pulling from the nuances of life, the complexities and sort of complications of making sense of things, that kind of like jazz in a way, right? Of learning and unlearning systems. I like the notion of those rhythms, of juxtaposing opposites and creating something that makes sense visually, that one would never think those would go together, but somehow they do, and it makes sense. Where does the creativity from inside come from? I think it comes from, I read a quote once by Lorraine Hansberry. She's a writer of Raising the Sun, and very prolific playwright for her time. And she wrote a quote, I might be paraphrasing, but the gist of it is, never be afraid to be still and think. So I think for my own creativity, with all the different projects that I have and all the exciting things that I'm doing, I always try to carve out a moment of contemplation, of reeling back, being my own critic, self-analyzing and looking inward and correcting and readjusting and pivoting, but taking the moment to just like be and think about things that are going around me, personal and professional, my environment, new ways of thinking and seeing, conversations, and just kind of taking that time for myself to just like, to assess. And I think that allows me the freedom not to be afraid to try new things. I'm learning more and more that you have to be in a state of being comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes. How do I translate the world around me and what I see as a creative outlet? How do I take in and absorb all around me? It's challenging. I think artists are conduits, right? We're cultivators, but we're also very vulnerable and sensitive. I think we have these kind of like antennas that sort of connect, to things that are unusual to someone normal or who lives their everyday life as a 9 to 5. We're always looking and taking information in. I'm a very visual person, so I'm constantly kind of scanning and registering. In my own world, for example, during the pandemic, I can use that as an example for myself. I was looking at the world around me, and I was most happiest about being an artist because I had something. I wasn't afraid of whatever. I was very satisfied with the fact that I was like, if this is the new world, this unknown that we were all living at that time, it was undefined, it was like unfamiliar. And I was very content with like knowing that I had something, and that was making art. And what I was doing was doing a lot of research that I wanted to do. So I kind of create my own residency, as you will. Start looking at a lot of things that I was collecting and looking at through research. And a lot of that was really ignited by what was happening with Black Lives Matter and sort of the protests because George Floyd. And I had already started prior to that because of all of, Breonna Taylor and all of these other sort of Black bodies that were being brutalized. I had already started looking at this disparity throughout history well before like civil rights, Tulsa massacre and all of that. And I was collecting these archival images. So the world around me, I was seeing these things and really trying to make sense of for myself how I could use this material as a way of expressing or articulating creatively what I was feeling doing. And that's how my Resist series really started. I'm interested in not turning the victim story into, or keeping it in the place of victimization. I'm interested in understanding our trauma and sort of our inherent trauma and flipping it and seeing who we are and how we survive from that, the other side of that. And that's celebrating aspects of sort of Black women specifically that are often not sort of pushed to the forefront, of really positioning us as main characters in a role of this storytelling of our lives that we live today and how we are extraordinary and we have And then it's not to say that these stories aren't told. You look at history through celebrity or entertainment and sports. We're great advocates of the world, right? And we've shaped many worlds, not just in America, global and universally. We've integrated our lives and part of the fabric of the histories in many countries. But I think oftentimes those histories aren't necessarily viably available to us to see ourselves in those lights, right? We have to find and research and discover, but now I think we do make sure those stories are being told, right? So I think it's, for me, as an artist, and basically, my own journey and sort of trajectory as an artist wasn't a sort of very comfortable or easy route to where I am today. But I think because of that, it's made me who I am. And I do believe you are chosen to be an artist because we can do anything. But I think to be an artist is also a radical act, right? To sort of go against the grain of normality. You're taking a big risk of having your ideas executed and having people listen and sort of want to carry that out further for you, whether it be in museums or exhibitions, however it goes. That exposure, that's a huge risk because it's not a guarantee. Like if you, there are many sort of outlets to become a doctor. So when you decide that you're going to become a doctor or a lawyer, you sort of know what that picture looks like, right? You have an idea of some kind of outcome of success if you decide that route. As an artist, it's such an unknown and a huge risk of you don't know. I think when I'm pulling from the Western canon or European history, specifically like Manet, and using those iconic images as a starting point, right? More so as a starting point for me, a way of navigating through histories that have been defined as incredibly important to shape our visual world, right? And you take Le Déjeuner, for example, very provocative during its time. I'm sure the artists during that time had no idea how historical that work would become. But I think because they were, during that particular period, Manet was working also against a particular norm. And I think anytime that happens, anytime this shift happens, that you push up against societal norms of respectability politics, there's something great to that. There's a magic that happens. And so for me, recognizing and using that as a platform or a way of entering is more to align and rewrite the narrative in the same way by inserting Black women. And many artists have used Le Déjeuner throughout history, and that is testament to the power of that particular image that Manet set out to. And you have actually 4 figures in the image. You have the woman washing herself in the background. You have the woman who's partially nude. And then you have the woman seated who's nude with 2 men who are dressed. So you have there's a lot to that of sort of seduction, desire, sort of the male gaze. the disparity between gender roles, all of that. And for that particular time was a huge risk for an artist to sort of throw those tropes into the idea of a painting. What thoughts go in my mind when I work with images of public figures like Michelle Obama and Oprah Winfrey? I use them because of who they are, and I'm using them as a signifier and sort of catalyst of possibility for people to see themselves and the heroicism of these women, of all and what they have shaped and created and sort of manifested, so that young girls can see that the possibility of that. I think it's important to, there's so many images of them out in the world, but when you sort of reimagine that to sort of push it up in the forefront, it's just really important in the same way as, Andy Warhol has used Jackie O, right? So you create them, make them sort of these iconic, classic beings in the world. So when young girls see themselves, they have reference points to sort of connect themselves to. That particular image I did was actually for a charity event for kids. It was a benefit print. It was just before President Obama became President Obama. And I just really wanted to speak about the importance of Michelle Obama. And I wanted to bring that into the space in the world of these kids to show that here's someone that's going to change your life, our lives, as the first African-American First Lady in America, and what that may mean for us. I believe in the power of images, and I believe images do change the world. I think images are, is it Malcolm McLaren who says media is the message, right? It truly is. Media, printed matter, those are providing an insight to a world for people to explore, to fantasize, to have aspiration, to connect themselves to, but it also can be manipulated. So there's sort of pros and cons to images. I think there's an oversaturation of images today because everyone is a photographer, because the accessibility of now we're carrying a camera on our phones, on all mobile devices. And there's this need to constantly capture the moment as if it's lost if you don't. I think we got to get away from that in a little. I try to when I travel, I don't always take pictures because I want to enjoy the moment. I don't take pictures of everything I eat or my daughter and all her event. I think there's just moments of it is what it is right then and there, and I retain the information. There's something to that of seeing something and then reinterpreting that through your imagination. And I think with the oversaturation of images now, we're not strengthening that part of our brains anymore. So I try to sort of train myself by oftentimes, as you will, tie your arm behind your back and not do that all the time. So I'm very excited when I go to a theater performance and they say no cameras. Or if I go into a club and they want to take your phone It allows you to just be in the moment, and you forget that there was a time when we weren't always. And oftentimes what I do at lectures, I say that I don't want people taking pictures of me, because it doesn't allow us to be as candid and sort of as free with ourselves, because everything's documented. You have to be conscientious about how you sit, what you say, and things just being sort of regurgitated over and over. Like, I think there's this need right now to really protect our sort of identity in space, because it is, especially with AI now, there's so much that's being overly documented. And so I think even as people, we should be a little more respectful of each other's personal space when it comes to our mobile devices. That not everything needs to be captured or shared. I think Krista Tippett, who is an incredible advocate and Pulitzer winner, talks about a spiritual revolution. That she believes that until we all spiritually become aware and unified with understanding our human race as a society, universally, is when we will understand that transformation of what we all aspire to, is for equality, being able to live together with our differences, of tolerance. Because I'm not trying to have you be me, but I want to be able to sit down and talk about our differences without trying to change you, right? But I want to be able to accept that we're different and still be able to live together, whether we're next door or at the table. I believe that. And I think sometimes I don't understand why we are here. We should not be where we are today. It's quite embarrassing that we are. But I think we're all responsible for where we are. It's not one versus the other. It's not us or them. Because even the outcome of where we are today has to do with all of us. And did I do all that I could? Probably not. But I'm looking at that and trying to figure out what I can do. And one of those things is really trying to cultivate an understanding of community awareness, and being very much an advocate for change, and supporting the right organizations, whether it's financially or physically in some ways, being readily available for hard conversations, but also being open to they may not land as well on me. And I think I'm also ready to roll up my sleeves in any way, because I do believe in justice. And I think we just really have to, this issue in America is not just an American issue. There's things happening everywhere. I think it's a sort of unfortunate cancerous disease that's spreading. And I think we need to really figure it out. collectively. And I think artists, we always find a way of creating this change. And I think we are doing it. And we'll continue to do it. And we'll continue to come together as a community, create safe spaces for people, have open conversation, and not work through fear.